If you're currently job seeking and you feel like you are being discriminated against because of your age, this presentation is for you. My name is Amanda Hill at the Workforce Centers of South Central Kansas, and today I'll be presenting on overcoming ageism. This topic can get a little touchy, a bit sensitive, and so I just ask that you stay with me and that you keep an open mind. Really, the purpose of this presentation is to help you overcome the possible age discrimination that you're experiencing by giving you tips and tricks in doing so. And so obviously you can't change how old you are, but there are some things that you do have power and control of. And so we're going to address those things today. First, though, let's go ahead and clarify the definition of ageism, and that is a prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's age. This can happen on both the younger end of the spectrum as well as the older end of the spectrum. However, most people that are saying that they are experiencing this age discrimination tend to be over 40. JT O'Donnell at workatdaily.com has a YouTube channel, and one of the videos that she has goes over this age discrimination and how to overcome it. One of the things that she specifically mentions in her videos is this theory of wisdom tax. And that's the belief that most people feel that the older generation brings with them to the workplace, and that's that older equals wiser. And so that because they have so much experience, they are, of course, wiser and better, okay? And so instead of calling it age discrimination, she calls it experience discrimination, is exactly, what you guys are experiencing when you feel that you are being denied employment based on your age, is that they're really discriminating on the experience you bring to the table. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that 50% of the workforce are millennials right now, and that includes recruiters. Don't know if you remember, but at one point in time when the millennials were entering the workforce, they were actually the ones being discriminated against. So as mentioned before, it can even happen to the younger crowd as well. The assumption back then was that the millennials were lazy and entitled and things of that nature. Now that the millennials have gotten in some work experience and are now, in positions that often have the power to hire, it has now kind of turned the tables because instead of the younger generation being discriminated against, now it tends to be that the older generation may be being discriminated against. Age discrimination is supposed to happen, but I'll be the first to tell you that it does. And so there are some things that you can do to hopefully overcome those, and we're going to address those here in a moment. Many times the reason that this experience discrimination really happens is the assumption, and it's an assumption, so it's not that it is true here, is that they can get better, faster, cheaper. With experience generally means that it's going to cost more to get your experience, right? And with the older generation, the assumption is that they really haven't kept up on some of the technology, so they might not be as efficient, or with some of the technology that allows you to be a little bit more creative and things like that, that they might not be as innovative, etc. So that's generally the assumption that is made as to why they might go with somebody that falls into more of the younger generation, is that they can get better, faster, cheaper. The thing to keep in mind is that recruiters are technical buyers. So they are tasked with screening and evaluating to choose the best fit. So when they're looking at your resume, they are trying to determine, or when they're interviewing you, are you going to be the best fit in terms of that better, faster, cheaper? Are you going to be able to fit in those categories? You may actually have to rebrand yourself to get screened in instead of screened out. Recruiters hear what they see. And that includes your appearance, the way you look, talk, and act, as well as your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and even your approach to your job search. They are looking at all of that and making a decision on whether you're going to be that best fit. One of the first tips to get screened in instead of out is to get a growth mindset. The assumption is that the older generation possesses this fixed mindset as opposed to this growth mindset that they generally say that this younger generation possesses. So the fixed mindset, they believe, is one that avoids challenges, shies away from things they don't know, unable to handle criticism or feedback, that intelligence and talent is static and doesn't develop post-birth, do not carry out any actions without seeking approval, focused on proving yourself, threatened by others' success, effort is not regarded as fruitful, understanding failure as the limit of ability, and gives up easily. In other words, they believe that the older generation is focused on themselves only and about their own performance, threatened by the success of others, unable to handle that constructive feedback, and avoids challenges, gives up, and doesn't continually evolve with the changing of times and technology and things of that nature. On the flip side, they kind of give it to the younger generation that they possess this growth mindset as one that would view challenges as opportunities, acknowledge and embrace their weaknesses, learn to give and receive constructive criticism, that intelligence and talent is dynamic and ever improving, that they prioritize learning over seeking approval. They focus on the process instead of the end result. They're inspired by others' success. They think of learning as brain training, understand that failure is an opportunity to grow, and persist in the face of setbacks. The assumption about the younger generation is that they view challenges as an opportunity to grow and to continually learn. And they're not scared to fail, and they're inspired by other success. You've got that team atmosphere, okay? And that they're empowered to make decisions. And so adopting this growth mindset will be important in you being able to demonstrate that to those that may be looking at potentially hiring you. That's going to be so important in you demonstrating that growth mindset in order to really be able to move forward within the hiring process. In order to get screened in and set it out, there's a few things that you can do to kind of elaborate on some of the things that we already talked about to show this demonstration of you having this growth mindset. The first thing you need to do is you need to replace your frustration with curiosity. Right now, you're probably really frustrated if you've been searching for work and you've been unsuccessful in finding employment, and especially if you feel that the reason you've been unsuccessful is because of your age. So instead of having that chip on your shoulder, replace that frustration with curiosity and how can I show them that I'm just as good as the next person, that I'm willing to learn and willing to adapt. The attitude that you should take on is the older I get, the more I have to learn. You want to make sure you also practice intellectual humility. And so again, that learning attitude that you don't know it all. Millennials were raised in a team environment. And so they very much possess the attitude of, it's not that you're the best, you're part of the best. So taking on that attitude, giving credit where credit is due instead of it all being on you as far as your accomplishments. Make sure even when you talk about your accomplishments, that it's accomplishments of the collective, everybody that worked together as a team. Ask, don't tell. This goes back to that curiosity, shows that you have that, and it also shows that you have that intellectual humility. Create that opportunity to show that intellectual humility, by asking questions. This shows them that you're also able to collaborate and that you're not just trying to dominate. You also want to make sure that you update your career tools to get screened in instead of out. One of the very first things that you should be updating is your resume. Your resume is the very first thing that the employer sees generally before calling you in for an interview. And so this is a lot of times where people get screened out because their resume already is screaming how old they are. One of the things that you can do is make sure that you don't put anything that suggests over 10 years. So don't go back further than 10 years on your resume. Don't put over 20 years experience in XYZ. Change it to over 10 years experience in XYZ. Remove your graduation dates. Also, your email address matters. It can also show your age. A lot of times people will have, for example, J. Smith, 1942 at sbcglobal.net. That 1942, they're going to assume is the year that you were born. So taking out numbers that might be assumed that that's your birth year or how old you are, those things are simple things that you can change to avoid some of those assumptions. The sbcglobal.net part, that also is something that you would want to consider. If you have an email address like at cox.net or at AOL, at Hotmail, at Yahoo, those are considered to be some of the older generation email addresses. You want to get something like Gmail, a more up-to-date, new age email provider. The older you get, the more simpler your resume should actually be. So you want to tease them a little bit, give them enough to want to know more, to spark their curiosity, to call you and ask questions. However, generally what we see is that the older you get, the longer your resume gets, the more wordy it gets, and you're wanting to cram all of your experience into your resume. And that's not the way that you want to go. In fact, if you haven't taken my resume class, I encourage you to do so. We go over how to target your resume. And in targeting your resume, you're really focusing on the position you're applying for, and you're taking out all of the irrelevant stuff. That will help you out a lot in being able to make that resume a little bit more simpler. You also want to make sure that your social media profiles are not only professional, but again, keep in mind, ageless on your social media as well, including, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and your LinkedIn. So again, the years, graduation dates, all of those things that might be on those profiles that could be linked back to your age, you also want to try to make those ageless. The other thing that can sometimes be a red flag for employers is if you don't have any social media at all. It can actually deter recruiters just as much as if you had something unprofessional or, age information on your social media. What they think when they don't see social media is that you don't have the technological skills to have a social media account. So if you don't have anything, I would encourage you to create something, even if it's something that you don't access very often, but just so that you have a social media presence. When you attend networking events, do not shy away from the younger crowd. In fact, you should gravitate towards them. Just keep in mind when you're having these conversations, whether at networking events or in interviews, to also make sure that your conversations don't lead to things that might also give clues to how old you may be. And step number 5 in getting screened in instead of out is to remain and stay positive. And this can be really hard, especially if you've been turned down quite often and you feel like they are turning you down just because of your age. That could be very frustrating. What you don't want to do is have a negative attitude or let that get to you and get you down, because it really does begin to show when you're going to your interviews and you're talking to employers. So you want to make sure that you get excited about growth. This is going to be one of the most important steps to show that you are willing to learn and that you can accept that constructive feedback and that you're willing to evolve and grow as times change. That willingness is going to be imperative in order for you to be successful. One of the things that you should be prepared for is the expectation that you'll need to reassure the recruiter on how much longer you hope to work. They're probably going to ask that question. The thing here is that you can be strategically vague. You want to make sure you express your enthusiasm for work, but you don't necessarily have to say whether that's 3, 4, 5 years. You could say something like, I'm committed to working and reaching my full potential at this point in my career. And that's how you can be strategically vague with expressing that enthusiasm for work. As we've gone over this information, some of the sources I pulled the information from to produce this presentation was the #1 tip to beat age discrimination in 2020 by the JT O'Donnell with Work It Daily, and then the 5 ways to overcome age discrimination during your job search, which was published in 2021. So hopefully these tips, which are new, up to date, will help you in finding the things that you can control and then going ahead and making those adaptations, changes, adopting that positive attitude, that growth mindset in helping you overcoming the barrier that you may be finding in terms of experience discrimination. Hopefully this was helpful for you today. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.